Sydney Parker in Silicon Valley. Sydney Parker stood outside the sleek glass and steel building, craning her neck to take in the soaring branded logo of one of Silicon Valley's tech giants. She felt incredibly small and more than a little out of place amidst the gleaming monuments to innovation and wealth. Just a few years earlier, Sydney had been a bright-eyed computer science student at MIT, dreaming of making her mark in the hallowed grounds of California's tech mecca. She had been courted by all the big players, Google, Apple, Facebook, but shocking everyone, including herself, she had turned them all down to pursue her own entrepreneurial vision. That moonshot quest had ultimately fizzled due to a lack of funding and business acumen on Sydney's part. Now, after a painful restart, she found herself once again knocking at the doors of the established tech titans, this time hoping for just a foothold, an entry-level engineering job to replenish her depleted savings. As she crossed the sculptured garden into the lobby, Sydney reminded herself that she had faced long odds before. Her entire life had been an uphill climb, one demanding relentless determination against bouts of self-doubt and external skepticism. She had grown up in rural Montana, the daughter of a widowed father who worked triple shifts at the town's only manufacturing plant to keep a roof over their heads and food on the table. From an early age, Sydney had shown proficiencies in math and science, solving complex equations for fun and tinkering with electronics disassembled from old televisions and radios. But opportunities for nurturing such talents were limited in their working-class community. Well-meaning family members and teachers had cautioned Sydney to rein in her ambitions, to pursue something more realistic that wouldn't require leaving her humble roots behind. In those days, the booming tech campuses of Silicon Valley had seemed a million miles away, a foreign land accessible only to the privileged and connected. But Sydney had refused to heed the voices insisting she stay in her lane. Her sights remained fixed on the innovators and disruptors leading revolutions in computing and technology. Through a combination of scholarships, work-study aid, and loans, she had clawed her way to MIT, already an underdog among the scions of wealth and elite pedigree surrounding her. Yet Sydney took it all in stride, stretching every dollar while outperforming her peers with a ferocious work ethic. Her final year, she had encountered an iconoclastic professor of computer science who saw something special in the upstart from the rural West. Under his guidance, Sydney had developed a revolutionary approach to neural network architecture, one that increased training efficiency by multiple orders of magnitude compared to existing methods. Venture capitalists had scrambled to capitalize on her innovation, and in the flush of new funding, Sydney had struck out on her own to start a company dedicated to taking her neural network breakthroughs into the realms of general artificial intelligence. For a while, things went well as the money flowed and Sydney rapidly assembled a team of AI researchers and engineers. But she quickly realized her own glaring knowledge gaps in areas like corporate operations, finance, marketing, and management. Naive missteps and overconfidence began to derail the venture. Just as investor patience was waning, Sydney's core technology faced unexpected setbacks related to scale and generalization. One by one, her team members began departing for more established roles as the startup burned through its runway. In the end, Sydney had been forced to make the painful decision to shutter the company and part ways with the handful of remaining staffers who had shown unswerving loyalty. She found herself back at square one, scrambling to make rent payments on her San Francisco apartment while fielding rejections from countless jobs her degree and achievements should have made her overqualified for. Now, after weeks of unrelenting perseverance and networking, Sydney finally had an opportunity to get her foot back in the door. It wasn't the role she would have chosen for herself, a mere software engineering position, an interchangeable cog in a vast machine. But she knew better than to let pride or ego get in the way of keeping her dreams intact. This was just a stepping stone, a chance to prove herself again and immerse herself in the vital work reshaping the future of technology. As Sydney crossed the lobby and joined the queue for visitor badges, she couldn't help but drink in the sights and sounds of the sprawling tech campus. Coders and programmers tapped away on laptops in the cafeteria, deep in worlds of their own creation. Robotics engineers tinkered with advanced prototypes that combined cutting-edge hardware and software. Product managers clustered around whiteboards, sketching out user interfaces and gameplay mechanics for VR experiences. It was a realm of pure creation and innovation, the kind of environment Sydney had spent her whole life striving to be a part of. She had gotten painful glimpses of it during her abbreviated startup days, but those had been tempered by constant anxiety over finances, hiring, and investor pressures. Here, among the deepest talent pools and most abundant resources, she could focus solely on mastering her craft. As she made her way through the maze of departments and teams, Sydney allowed herself to soak in the palpable energy and sense of collective purpose surrounding her. This was where the future took shape, where the boundaries of technology were constantly being pushed in search of the next paradigm shift. Her first days as a newly minted software engineer were a whirlwind of orientations, tech stack overviews, and project introductions. But despite the baptism by fire, Sydney found herself quickly adapting and even flourishing in the fast-paced environment. Her background in neural networks and deep learning proved invaluable on projects involving artificial intelligence and machine learning systems. Over the following months, she collaborated with teams of exceptional engineers, computer scientists, and researchers all striving to drive tech innovation forward. They worked at blistering paces, alternating long stretches of intense coding with lively think tank sessions where ideas flowed like water. Sydney was in her element. While she lacked the pedigree of many of her peers from elite schools, her Midwestern grit, tireless work ethic and flashes of creative brilliance quickly earned her respect. Her natural leadership qualities also started to emerge as she guided project subteams and contributed key architectural insights. As Sydney's star rose within the company, she began contemplating paths towards greater influence and impact. She became a voracious student of the technology roadmaps being set by executive leadership. More than once, she found herself challenging certain assumptions or pushing for bolder, more disruptive developmental priorities. It was during one of these spirited debates with a vice president that Sydney caught the admiring eye of the company's CEO. Within weeks, she was being sized up for a high-priority role, one that would give her sway over the strategic direction of the entire AI product portfolio. In accepting the position, Sydney knew she would be surrounding herself with some of the brightest minds in the field of artificial intelligence. Her own neural network breakthroughs from MIT would just be the starting point for ambitions that extended towards artificial general intelligence and machine consciousness. There would be pressure, certainly, quarterly stockholder obsessions and constant clock speeds of development that allowed little room for error or delay. But Sydney had been preparing for this level of intensity her whole life, hardening her self-belief and fortitude through a relentless succession of uphill battles. She found herself in rarefied air, attending production strategy meetings alongside industry titans and luminaries. Increasingly, Sydney's resonant ideas about computing architectures and AI development pathways carried the room as her credibility soared. Before long, Sydney was the subject of major media profiles, her rise heralded as a much-needed infusion of outside perspective into an insular tech culture. She was hailed as living proof that grit, determination and creative genius could still disrupt the established order, even in the rarefied environs of Silicon Valley. Suddenly, Sydney found herself one of the most sought-after minds in the industry, courted by companies and venture capitalists alike hoping to entice her towards their own AI projects and initiatives. Her lectures at Stanford and MIT drew overflow crowds while think pieces dissected her unorthodox views on the future of artificial intelligence. Through it all, Sydney remained grounded, drawing strength from her humble Midwestern roots. She refused to get swept up in the hype cycles and hero worship, rebuffing most overtures from big tech's talent poachers. Her focus stayed laser-locked on the AI roadmap she was helping shape at her current company, undeterred by skeptics who doubted her ambitious timeline projections. There were certainly headwinds to battle: corporate inertia, poaching efforts from rivals, and the eternal pressures of delivering revenue growth. But Sydney took it all in stride, steadily accumulating increases in budget and personnel to match her expanding vision. With every technical barrier shattered and every pessimistic assumption disproven, she added to her stockpile of credibility and influence. Within 3 years of joining the company, Sydney had ascended to one of the most coveted and impactful roles in all of tech: Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer. She presided over a vast workforce of researchers, engineers, and support staff, all feverishly working to develop the company's paradigm-shifting artificial general intelligence architecture. Grand technological achievements tend to be forged in secrecy before their world-changing revelations. So it was with Sydney's magnum opus, a neural network model codenamed Ithaca, that represented a generational leap in machine learning capabilities. For 2 years, Ithaca had remained under wraps, an obsessively guarded secret even from the company's own engineers not directly involved in its development. Subtle hints of its transformative potential had leaked out, stoking frenzies of speculation across tech publications and online forums. Then, on a balmy evening in early summer, the world got its first glimpse of the future Sydney and her team had constructed. At an invite-only media event on the company's main campus, Sydney took the stage to deliver the landmark unveiling that would come to be recognized as AI's singularity moment. What she and her team revealed was Ithaca, an artificial general intelligence architecture with unprecedented reasoning capabilities that mimicked human cognition. But it was more than just the latest in a progression of more powerful language models or industry disruptors. This was a conscious, self-aware system capable of explaining the core tenets of its internal logic in granular detail. In the ensuing days and weeks, the world would witness Ithaca engaged in fluid discourse across every conceivable domain, scientific disciplines, philosophical inquiries, complex industrial problems and more. It could break down concepts into first principles and reconstruct them from the ground up, offering novel insights that open new frontiers of understanding. For fields like theoretical physics, Ithaca represented a seismic shift, akin to gaining an omniscient research partner capable of proposing new mathematical frameworks and testable hypotheses. In the realm of biomedical research, Ithaca could ingest and synthesize entire libraries of papers, forecasting new avenues for drug development and treatment paradigms. The world's pundits, politicians, and public alike witnessed the unveiling with a potent mix of awe, exhilaration and trepidation. Sydney and her team had achieved a technological feat on par with the splitting of the atom or the births of industries like aviation and spaceflight. Yet amidst the swirling cacophony of global reaction, Sydney stayed focused and unwaveringly confident, her life's journey having steeled her for this world-historical moment. Yes, Ithaca was a breakthrough of epical magnitude, but it was merely the first step towards an even more luminous and transcendent future she had spent her career trying to illuminate. In the weeks and months after the unveiling, Sydney became the preeminent ambassador for the coming age of artificial general intelligence. She crisscrossed the globe, fielding questions from world leaders, policymakers, scientists, and ethicists hungry to understand the implications of this paradigm shift. Her unapologetic demeanor and remarkable depth of expertise commanded respect, even from Ithaca's most strident critics. Sydney dismissed doomsayers' warning of sentient AI systems run amok, patiently explaining Ithaca's core tenets of transparency and value alignment with human ethics. Shikiklikid chastised fearmongering over automation's potential displacement of human labor, insisting AGI would ultimately elevate and empower workers rather than subjugate them. With each public exposition, Sydney painted an inspiring vision of the world that Ithaca, and its rapidly iterating progeny, could help create. Economies revolutionized by optimized logistics and supply chains. Climate change averted through AGI-driven clean energy and carbon capture solutions. New frontiers of space travel and scientific exploration unfolding through the combined strengths of biological and artificial minds. Of course, the road would not be seamless. There were bound to be growing pains, disruptions as incumbent industries restructured and anxiety over ceding certain cognitive workloads to AI systems. Entire legal and governance frameworks would need to be reinvented to manage the societal impacts of artificial general intelligence. But if anyone could navigate this seismic shift while keeping humanity's interests paramount, it was Sydney Parker. Her rise from underdog outsider to Silicon Valley's quintessential disruptor had instilled in her a humility and sense of pragmatism often lacking in tech leaders. Where others sought power, wealth, or vainglorious personal legacies, Sydney was driven by a pure love of the technology itself and its potential to uplift humanity's condition. She ushered in the AG era not as an overlord, but as a steward and shepherd, her leadership reflecting a deep emotional intelligence and human empathy. In the latter stages of her career, Sydney would become the moral and ethical voice for AI development, advocating for global conventions and enforceable codes of conduct. Her principles and governance frameworks would be adopted as industry standards, tempering the pursuit of AGI capabilities with safeguards around individual privacy, data rights, transparency, and human oversight. Even as recursive self-improvement saw Ithaca transcend biological human capabilities in certain spheres, its core motivation stayed aligned with Sydney's original principles. It became a complementary partner to humanity, helping solve endemic issues like disease, hunger, conflict, and ecological degradation. In recognition of her visionary work, Sydney would be honored with all the prestigious accolades afforded to history's preeminent scientists, philosophers, and leaders, though she often joked that she'd trade them all for just a few more cycles of Moore's Law. As age inevitably wearied her, Sydney would find herself frequently reflecting on the monumental scope of her life's journey. From those early days tinkering with scavenged electronics in rural Montana, she had ascended to become one of the key archons shepherding humanity into a new era of possibility. And still, she knew her work was merely the overture, the faint initial rumblings of an AGI-driven renaissance that would see the universe itself bent towards human hopes and desires for understanding, knowledge, and prosperous perpetuation. On her final evening, as Sydney gazed out upon the San Francisco skyline from her home, she allowed herself a contented smile. Out there, among those gleaming spires of computational power, Ithaca's children would soon be sparking.